Wednesday, March 22nd. You are listening to Weather with Enthusiasm. We have an inspirational weather event, as we spoke about yesterday, as our first summer expansive air mass comes into this country. Today actually will be the first time where temperatures, I don't know for sure if it's the first time, but we have quite a widespread area of 80s developing across Oklahoma, even moving into southern Kansas with some thunderstorm development. But that severe weather development increases for tomorrow. These 80s move east. Temperatures will likely the potential 80-degree air mass actually gets cut short in the St. Louis area for tomorrow as a cold front moves through in the afternoon. So those temperatures rise as if it's going to be 80 degrees, but we don't quite make it there due to that front that moves through. But thunderstorms, the humid, warm, the heat thunderstorms that are expected in the southern parts of Missouri, and Arkansas has a pretty decent severe weather risk, along with portions of Louisiana and Texas. When you go further to the south, portions of Texas will see high temperatures going into the 90s this week. And then we have a quick, especially Friday, and then Saturday, there's a quick little minor cool front that moves through, but we go back into the 90s for next week. Now, as we continue to discuss the warm side of the system, we will mention that we will be talking about the cold side of the system very shortly, because there's some phenomenal stuff going on the cold side as well, including for the Chicago area. Now, let's go over back to the warm side over here. We have temperatures. So in St. Louis, we have highs in the 70s. That warm air also makes its way into Baltimore for tomorrow. Now, it's not bad for Baltimore today. Highs in the mid-60s for Baltimore today. Tomorrow, highs in the mid-70s as that warmer air comes into the area. And then as that front approaches, now sometimes right before a front approaches, we have something called compressional warming. You're rarely going to hear that term used in regards to an approaching front. Usually that term is used in regards to downslope winds and stuff like that. But on Friday, as that front approaches, we're going to see an increase in warmth for the East Coast as temperatures go into the 80s. This is especially true over places that have increased solar insolation, which means very few clouds in the sky. Even in places in Virginia, all the way up north, relatively speaking, temperatures go into the mid-80s. But because of that front, Baltimore looks like it will probably be to the north of the front, so temperatures may not be able to get that warm. In fact, highs might only stay in the 50s. The European computer model is even showing temperatures in the 40s during Friday afternoon. Now, I was thinking that, so these fronts are not really so predictable or forecastable. And let me explain at least one reason why. So, first of all, a lot of times they're not really connected so much to the jet stream. They've become stationary. But here's another thing, is that these fronts, the movement of the front, these are stationary fronts, and the movement of the front is a lot of times dependent upon thunderstorms, and thunderstorms are not so forecastable. So the front tends to move along the outflow of a thunderstorm. So if you should have thunderstorms that develop along the front, which is really common, that's going to push the front further to the south. If there's no thunderstorms that develop along the front, so then that front remains stationary, or in some situations could start to move up north as a warm front. I think it's more common for the mess, if there is a mess up, the more common scenario would be for something like in southern Virginia, instead of it being in the mid-80s, for temperatures to stay in the 50s due to some thunderstorms that develop along the front, and the front ends up getting pushed south of that outflow of the storms. The question is, could a thunderstorm go ahead and push that front north, further north than what was originally expected? I don't think it could, but I don't know. Maybe you could have, I don't know all the different scenarios. Usually, from what I remember, when these forecasts are a bust, they are a bust in the direction of overestimating the temperatures. for the front has gone further south than what they originally thought. But in regards to the front going further north than what they originally thought, those things are not so common, in my memory at least. Okay, so that's number one. Number two is something that we mentioned really in the beginning of the week. It was on a podcast. I took the podcast off because there was so much other stuff not connected to weather on the podcast. But at the very end of the podcast, there was mention of a possible snowstorm in Chicago Friday night. So I wanted to just speak a little bit more about that because that also is not going to be publicized too much. Because it's complicated. For Milwaukee as well, it's complicated. So the story is, first I want to change, the background music is a little bit strange over here. But what could I do? Can't really change it. All right, so the complication is like this. Temperatures are borderline cold. Here's the thing. As difficult as it is to forecast snow, with the other difficult thing to forecast is thunderstorms. The whole thing is that there really is not enough cold air to produce snow here in Chicago Friday night. However, we are on the cold side of the system, which means the air aloft is very cold. If there is a way to bring the air aloft up in the sky, if there's a way to bring that air down to the surface, then the precipitation would be falling as snow. Should that happen, that would be called dynamic cooling. The way for that to happen is for there to develop heavy precipitation rates. The way that would form, for Friday night, there is a chance for thunderstorms. Here in Chicago, we have a chance for thunderstorms. Thunderstorms increase the precipitation rates. Should the precipitation rates become heavy, the precipitation will fall as snow, and we would see some slushy snowfall accumulation within the area. Right now, forecasters are talking about this being a possibility for northern Illinois, extreme northern Illinois, and even more so for Milwaukee. And either way, heavy precipitation is a good possibility Friday night in whatever form it falls in. What's important to know over here is that even if the forecast is calling for rain, so if you wake up Shabbos morning and you see snow, so it's not as big of a bust as what you might think, because there is the possibility of this precipitation falling as snow. It has been mentioned. And here's the other thing, is that would be less of a bust than what happened a couple of weeks ago when there was a large amount of snow forecasted for Chicago and nothing happened. Everything went south of Chicago. So if that could happen, there's a better chance of this precipitation falling as snow than what happened a couple weeks ago with the storm to go completely south of Chicago. That ended up happening, even though there was such a small chance of that happening. It wasn't even brought up as a possibility, really. What was mentioned as a possibility is that very dry air over the Chicago area could cause the precipitation to evaporate before touching the ground, but usually that's only in the initial stages of the storm. For the whole thing to go south, I don't really think that was brought up until Friday, and even then, it wasn't going to go completely south. But so this Friday night, we do have, it's a slim chance, but again, the chances are higher for this happening than what happened a couple weeks ago for the precipitation to fall as snow. The main snowmaker will be occurring Shabbos morning in a city like Milwaukee. And it's very difficult. It's really too hard to forecast these things. The easiest thing to do is just to say that precipitation, we have a precipitation maker that will be coming into the area Friday night and Shabbos morning. Temperatures across Washington, D.C. on Friday, highs ranging from the upper 50s to the low 70s. If you really want to include all shitas, highs from the mid 40s to the mid 80s. That would be it's probably going to be accurate if you say highs from the mid 40s to the mid 80s for Washington, D.C. Friday afternoon. That's a real complicated situation. Both of these things are dependent somewhat on thunderstorms, and that front in general is very, very difficult to forecast. So we have a severe weather outbreak with even in the Chicago area, actually, we have a chance for severe weather, especially areas south of Interstate 80 as we go through the day today, into tonight, into tomorrow morning. Tonight, especially after 2 or 3 a.m. tonight, thunderstorms, some could be severe, ground-to-sky lightning, and or what they call ground-to-cloud lightning, along with large hail which could cause damage to things, could develop in Chicago sometime after 2 or 3 a.m. later on tonight. That's something to keep in mind. And St. Louis also. This is all these places along the front. So the front moves from northwest to southeast. So right ahead of the front is when you have the real warm temperatures, and then the front moves through, and along the front's when you have the thunderstorms. Sometimes well ahead of the front, you get these supercell things that develop, and that's what they would have to watch out for in Louisiana, Texas, Arkansas, places like that. The high dew point air stays away from the mid-Atlantic area, stays away from places east of the Appalachians, unless you're one of the Gulf Coast states. The high dew point air of temperatures in the mid-60s, dew points in the mid-60s, some dew points even coming very close to 70 across the Gulf Coast states, but dew points in the mid-60s for places that border the Gulf Coast states, but to the north, Arkansas, even Missouri, though, southern Illinois, dew points going into the low to mid-60s later on tonight into tomorrow morning. High dew point air, dew points is a form of energy as well. I wish everyone a great day, enjoy the weather, and have a lot of fun. You've been listening to the podcast Weather with Enthusiasm.